Hi everyone, welcome back. This is the last video in our series on standards, alignment, and student agency. I'm still Kendra.
I am still Lacy.
And we've still got Courtney here with us today.
Hey.
All right, so we are going to take this time to tie all of the work that we've done in the last two sessions and bring it to a culminating product, idea. We're going to tie it all back together. So first, let's go and take a look at that learning progression that we built from the last session. I want to point out to you that you guys did a lot of hard work. You got feedback from your colleagues. You probably have a long list of activities and assessments that your kids can do on here. But I do want to point out that all we have are adult ideas, that this may or may not be boring for students, right? I mean, I was told not to say boring, but what we have are a bunch of adult ideas, and we want to offer you a challenge. We want you to think about or consider opening this up to students and getting some of their ideas in here. And we know that this is scary for teachers, but we're going to try and show you what the benefit is and how it can be easier than you think.
Lacy, let's talk a little bit about transparency. I think a lot of people, not only in education, would agree that standards for learning should be simple and clear.
You're absolutely right. And in fact, one of our friends, Jody Stallings, just wrote an article in the Moultrie News, and we've linked the article to our website if you're interested in checking it out. He makes a great point in that being an 8th grade English teacher, his standards often sound like this. One of them says, integrate an information cueing system that includes meaning, semantics, structure, syntax, visual, graphophonic, and pragmatic or schematics to make meaning from text. And he says in his article, his point is that this is a convoluted standard. It is hard for adults with degrees to understand, much less for students. And because he is an experienced and excellent teacher, he knows that this standard basically means that students are able to read. So the article continues to make great points, but he says, if we could just simplify the standards, if we could get everybody on the same page and have everybody speaking the same language and make sure that the teacher knows what they're supposed to teach and the students know what they're supposed to learn, that it's going to be helpful for everybody in the classroom.
I think that's a good point. And we're all experienced educators, Lacy. Imagine being a brand new teacher struggling with 30 wild pre-recess 8th grade teachers reading at a 5th grade level and trying to get them to do any of these things. A lot of these standards are unintelligible. If we think back to our example from video 1, that social studies standard, it's insane. It's hard to understand these. And if we're asking parents and teachers to understand them, let alone students, it's crazy.
I had an experience when I was teaching at Meminger. I taught resource there. I was terrified to unpack a standard with my students. But one day I just said I was going to do it, and I did it. But my students were so excited when I did, and I'll never forget one of my students, after we did it, he said, "This is what you've been teaching us?" And he couldn't wait for us to do it some more. He actually wanted us to unpack more standards, and he wanted me to teach in that way more. Because he actually understood what we were learning.
So it was probably scary at first, right?
Oh, it was terrifying.
And did you initially think, oh, this will take me forever?
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to just unpack the standards with the kids?
Oh, probably 3 to 5 minutes, just depending upon the standard.
All right, so on the website, we have a video linked which shows you a lower elementary school teacher
At CCSD.
in CCSD unpacking the standards with her students. But Courtney, have you seen people do this with secondary students?
I have.
And is it just as easy?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I would have to put a disclaimer out there that the secondary standards are a little bit meatier, but I would say that maybe you could break them down into chunks.
Okay. And I know I'm a secondary teacher. Anytime I watch anything with elementary students, I'm like, that's not for me. But I imagine I could probably, if I wanted, I could get all my secondary kids on the floor in a circle and do the exact same thing just as easy.
You could also just leave them in their chairs.
I could do that.
You could even identify those power standards or the most important standards to unpack throughout the year, not unpacking every single one, because there are hundreds.
I think that's a really good point on focusing on power standards, and that might be a good starting place for anyone who's starting with this,
Exactly.
just to begin.
Exactly. Or just your favorite subject. Just dive in one subject.
That's a great idea.
So
All right, so part of your challenge, part of what I want you guys to be thinking about is if you can take a small risk and be transparent with your students, might you also consider giving them some control over how they're learning? And this is going to bring us to what we call student agency. So Kendra, can you explain to us a little bit about student agency?
Sure. Student agency is one of those funny things that we hear a lot about, but not everyone really understands what it is. So our definition of student agency is having the level of control, autonomy, and power that a student experiences in an educational situation. So there are different things that they can have agency over or giving them control over in your classroom. Those things are product, process, content, place, and pace. There's a lot of those things that you can't change in your classroom, but there are a few that you can. So it's up to you to decide what's going to work for you and what's a good starting place.
And kind of back to my same story about the unpacking and how scary it was. When I thought about all of that and when I wanted to give my students some control in the classroom or some choice or some agency, again, I was terrified. But I generated some ideas, sort of like on a learning plan, and gave the kids some choice in how they were going to demonstrate their evidence of mastery. And they actually chose most of the same ideas that I had already pre-brainstormed. And then they were more motivated to engage.
And they probably thought, Miss Courtney really cares about our opinions.
That's right.
Because she's asking us. Nobody's ever asked us before.
And she's asking us and then doing something with that information, even though they didn't know that it was things you had already picked.
Exactly. And they also understood that it was aligned to things that they needed to learn. So
that makes an actual perfect segue so if you are interested, if you want to ask your kids, if you want to be brave and ask your kids, so what do you guys think that you might want to do to learn about our standard? How could you go about doing that? So we have a bunch of different options. Some are digital, some are non-digital, and really the possibilities are endless. But just for a few tangible ideas, you could allow your students to answer questions in a Google form that you send through Classroom or Edmodo or something. You could gather them around in a group and have a short discussion. You could have a suggestion box on your wall where kids just go up and put on little pieces of paper ideas that they have. You could create a collaborative Padlet where students can just log one at any time and put something up there. You might also consider using some kind of collaborative mind mapping tool. But the next thing, if you have asked your students, well, what ideas do you have? The next question you might logically have is, so what do you do with all of those suggestions? So the first thing that we would suggest is you go back to that learning progression that you made for session 2 and you start adding them in the appropriate columns. So if they're showing mastery, you'd put it in the proficient level. If it's something to help them get to mastery, put it below, and so on and so forth. But another thing that you could do with all of these choices, because conceivably by this point you have lots and lots of ideas of different activities students could do, you could create a menu. And on our website, we've got a bunch of links to different menu templates, but I've just pulled 3 images here for us to take a look at. The first is a tic-tac-toe menu where students pull from 8 predetermined choices, plus you offer a free choice in the middle, and each of these choices is on the same level of blooms. So your kids can make tic-tac-toe by doing 3 different activities any way that they are interested in doing.
And just like we talked about with the learning progression, the kids don't have to complete all of these activities. Lacy pointed out that they're all on the same level of blooms, they're all addressing the same part of the standard. So whatever your students choose to do is achieving the same educational goal, whether they completed all of them or they completed 3 of them.
Another option or visual that I pulled for you is a menu contract, where these activities have now been listed on the left-hand side and they've been labeled. So the students would complete the main dish activities, meaning they need to do everything that's listed there, but you give them some choice with the side dishes and the desserts. And on the right-hand side, we have a 258 list menu where the kids are trying to do activities in order to create a certain number of points, and each of these activities listed is worth a different point value. So that reminds me of actually when I was little and would have to do chores. But my mom gave me a choice of which chores I wanted to do, so I don't know. I was about to say I liked it better, but I didn't.
So you're having some family agency, we could say.
Yeah, there we go.
And it's important to remember that if you're not 100% ready to ask students what they want to do, keep in mind that you can still exercise some student agency in your classroom. All those things that you put on your learning progression, those can be choices for a tic-tac-toe board. Those can be just options you give your kids. You can make a playlist for them. So there are a lot of ways that you can give control in your classroom a little bit over to your students.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
facilitated.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right, so let's wrap this up. We have, over the course of these 3 videos, we have done a lot of hard work. We have really dug into one standard. And in this last video, we've talked about transparency and student agency. And your task for this section is to complete a challenge. So your challenge, you also have some student agency here. We'd like you to choose one of these 3 challenges. And if you're one of our high flyers, we're going to encourage you to go ahead and choose all 3 of the 3 challenges. But here are the challenges. First challenge, have a conversation about your standard in kid-friendly terms with your students. Gather them up in a little circle and have a conversation. So be really clear about what the standard is. And I think the official terminology for this is unpacking, right? Unpack that standard with your kids. The second challenge, if you're interested, is ask your kids what their ideas are. You can use a digital or a non-digital tool to do this, but give them some student agency. Let them have a voice in how they're learning. And if you do allow them to have a voice in what they want to do and how they want to do it, go ahead and think about creating a menu or a playlist with all of those ideas and letting the kids choose how they want to learn what they're doing. So again, those are 3 challenges. They are clearly going to be spelled out on the website, but we want you to do at least one of these. And then we're going to have some reflections, questions. So the tangible turn-in for this section is to do a challenge and then reflect using the link that we have provided on the website. That's the end of our session. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to your coach or check back on the website for some detailed instructions. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for learning with us.